Transactional analysis, known as TA, is a method of understanding behavior in interpersonal dynamics. In fact, there's an International Transactional Analysis Association found at www.itaaworld.org that publishes the Transactional Analysis Journal. We all have three major ego states that affect our behavior or the way we transact through communication. Parent. The critical parent is evaluative, while the sympathetic parent is supportive. Child. The natural child is curious, while the adopted child is rebellious. Adult. The adult is a thinking, unemotional state of ego. We change ego states throughout the day, even during a single discussion. A series of transactions can take place during different ego states. Generally, the most effective behavior, human relations, and performance come from the adult ego state. When interacting with others, you should be aware of their ego state because it will help you understand why they're behaving the way they are and help you to determine which ego state you should use during the interaction. Within ego states, there are three different types of transactions: complementary, crossed, and ulterior. Complementary. The sender of the message gets the intended response from the receiver. Crossed. The sender does not get the expected response. And ulterior. The person appears to be in one ego state, but his or her behavior comes from a different ego state. Attitudes affect your behavior and human relations. Within the TA analysis framework, you have attitudes toward yourself and towards others. Positive attitudes are described as okay, and negative attitudes are described as not okay. With positive attitude towards yourself and others, you have a greater chance for having adult-to-adult ego state communication. You can change your attitudes, and you should if they're not positive. Stroking is any behavior that implies recognition of another's presence. Strokes can be positive and make people feel good about themselves, or they can be negative and hurt people in some way. Giving praise, positive strokes, is a powerful motivation technique that's easy to use and costs nothing. Assertiveness is the process of expressing thoughts and feelings while asking for what one wants in an appropriate way. You need to present your message without falling into the stereotypical too pushy, aggressive, or not tough enough, non-assertive, and passive traps. Passive or non-assertive behavior comes primarily through the obedient child or supportive parent ego state. Passive behavior is an avoidance of behavior or an accommodation of the other party's wishes without standing up for one's own rights. Passive people tend to deny the importance of things. When people know someone is passive, they tend to take advantage of the person. They make unreasonable requests, knowing the person can't say no. When the passive person does speak, others tend not to listen and tend to interrupt. Aggressive behavior comes primarily through the adopted child and the critical parent ego states, often through anger. Aggressive people are demanding, tough, rude, and pushy. They're competitive, hate to lose to the point of cheating, and tend to violate the rights of others to get what they want. When faced with aggressive behavior, the other party often retaliates with aggressive behavior, fights back, or withdraws and gives in, takes flight. People often avoid contact with the aggressive person or prepare themselves for a fight when transacting. Abusive employees and supervisors decrease work performance. Passive-aggressive behavior is displayed in different ways. The person uses both types of behavior sporadically. The person may be passive one day or moment and aggressive the next. The person uses passive behavior during the situation, then shortly after uses aggressive behavior. Passive-aggressive behavior can confuse others and lead to harmful human relations. Being assertive can create a win win situation. Assertive behavior is different from aggressive behavior, and the terms are not interchangeable. The key to preventing workplace violence is to recognize and handle suspicious behavior before it becomes violent. You most likely have heard of road rage. In business, we have desk rage and customer rage, which can take the form of yelling, verbal abuse, and physical violence. People who are angry or have been hurt in some way may become aggressive and seek revenge, sometimes through violence. It's natural to get angry sometimes. Although we cannot control the feeling of anger, we can control our behavior. Letting anger build up often leads to passive aggressive behavior. Anger can be tough to deal with, so here's some ideas to help. Remember that what you think about affects how you feel, and how you feel affects your behavior, human relations, happiness, and performance. So don't think about and dwell on your angry feelings. Be assertive, not passive, to help keep from using passive aggressive behavior. Develop a positive attitude about how to deal with anger. Use techniques for changing your attitudes and building a positive self concept, and develop positive affirmations. Use rational thinking. For example, when dealing with customers, tell yourself their anger is to be expected, it's part of your job to stay calm. Look for positives. In many bad situations, there's some good. Use an anger journal. A first step to emotional control of anger is self awareness. To understand why you get angry and how to deal with it more productively, write down and try to continuously improve. This method is an effective way to let out anger and change your angry behavior. In human relations, a conflict exists whenever two or more parties are in disagreement. Do you agree with everything people do and say in your relationships? If not, you're in conflict most likely every day. Your ability to manage conflict is critical to your success. We all rely on unwritten, implicit expectations by each other called the psychological contract. Often, we're not aware of our expectations until they've not been met. Communication problems or conflicts arise for three primary reasons. First, we fail to make our expectations known to other parties. Second, we fail to find out the expectations of other parties. And third, we assume that other parties have the same expectations that we have. In any relationship, to avoid conflict, share information and assertively discuss expectations early before the conflict escalates. Unfortunately, avoiding conflict is easier said than done. There are many different types of conflict, such as task, process, and relationships, negative and positive. Let's combine them into conflicts of ideas and personal. Conflict of ideas are positive because they can lead to improvements, such as solving problems, changing how you do tasks, and the process of making products and innovating new products. Conversely, personal conflict tends to be negative because it can hurt relationships and performance. There are five possible conflict styles. The forcing conflict style, user attempts to resolve the conflict by using aggressive behavior. The forcing approach attempts to satisfy one's own needs at the expense of others if necessary. Better organizational decisions will be made, assuming the forcer is correct, rather than less effective, compromised decisions. The disadvantage is that the overuse of this style leads to poor relationships, hostility, and resentment towards its user. Use this style when the conflict is about personal differences between others, maintaining close, supportive relationships is not critical, and conflict resolution is urgent. The avoider conflict style, user attempts to passively ignore the conflict rather than resolve it. Avoiders refuse to take a stance, physically leaving it or escaping the conflict by mentally leaving. Avoiding may maintain relationships but would hurt through conflict resolution. The disadvantage of this style is the fact that conflicts do not get resolved. An overuse of this style leads to conflict within the individual. Use the avoiding style when one's stake in the issue is not high. Confrontation will damage a critical working relationship, and a time constraint necessitates avoidance. The accommodating style user attempts to resolve the conflict by passively giving in to the other party. It attempts to satisfy the other party while neglecting one's own needs. Relationships are developed and maintained by accommodating. The disadvantage is that giving in to the other party may be counterproductive when you have a better solution. Use this style when maintaining the relationship outweighs all other considerations. The changes agreed to are not important to you, but are to the other party, and the time to resolve the conflict is limited. The compromising conflict style user attempts to resolve the conflict through assertive give and take concessions. This approach attempts to meet one's needs for harmonious relationships by finding a common interest. Using the compromising conflict style, the conflict may be resolved quickly and relationships are maintained. The disadvantage is that the compromise often leads to counterproductive results. Use this style when the issues are complex and critical and there's no simple or clear solution. All parties have a strong interest in different solutions and time is short. The collaborating conflict style user assertively attempts to resolve the conflict with the best solution agreeable to all parties. The focus on finding the best solution to the problem that is satisfactory with all parties. This is the only style that creates a win-win solution. Collaborating tends to lead to the best solution to the conflict using assertive behavior. One great disadvantage is the time and effort that it takes to resolve the conflict, which is usually greater and longer than with any other style. The collaborating style is appropriate when maintaining relationships is important, time is available, and it's a peer conflict. There's no one best style for resolving all conflicts. Your preferred style tends to meet your needs. Some people enjoy forcing, others prefer to avoid, and so forth. Success lies in one's ability to use the appropriate style to meet the situation. Some organizations encourage and teach employees to confront others through a culture of candor. The manner in which conflict is expressed influences reactions and how the conflict process unfolds successfully or not. Therefore, you can develop your ability to assertively confront or be confronted by people in a manner that resolves the conflict without damaging interpersonal relationships. We examine the roles of the initiator, responder, and mediator in conflict resolution next. The initiator is the person who confronts another person or other people about a conflict. Your attitude will have a major effect on the outcome of the confrontation. If you go into a confrontation expecting to argue and fight, you probably will. To resolve conflicts, you should develop a plan of action. When you initiate a conflict resolution using the collaborating style, follow the initiating conflict resolution steps. First, plan to maintain ownership of the problem using the XYZ model. Second, implement your plan persistently. And third, make an agreement for change. The XYZ model describes a problem in terms of behavior, consequences, and feelings. Part of the reason that we're not successful at resolving conflict is that we wait too long before confronting the other party, and we're in an emotional state without planning, using passive-aggressive behavior. We end up saying things that we don't mean because we haven't given thought to what it is we want to say and accomplish through confrontation. You should realize that when you're upset and frustrated, the problem is yours, not the other party's. There are 4 things we should not do during the opening XYZ statement. First, don't judge the person's behavior. Don't give advice. Don't make threats, and don't try to place blame. Both parties are usually to blame. Fixing blame only gets us defensive, which is counterproductive to conflict resolution. Keep the opening statement short. The longer the statement, the longer it will take to resolve the conflict. People get defensive when kept waiting for their turn to talk. Use the XYZ model. You do this when X behavior, Y consequence happens, and I feel Z feelings. When you smoke in my room, their behavior, I have trouble breathing and become nauseated, consequence to you, and I feel uncomfortable and irritated, your feeling. This is the XYZ model. After making your short planned XYZ statement, let the other person respond. If they acknowledge the problem and say they'll change, you've succeeded. Often, people don't realize there's a conflict when approached promptly, and they're willing to change. However, if the other party doesn't understand or avoids acknowledgement of the problem, persist. Explain it in different terms, and be sure to listen to the other party and watch for nonverbal cues. Try to agree on a specific action you both will take to resolve the conflict. Remember that when you're collaborating, you're not forcing. If possible, get a commitment statement describing the change. You are the responder when someone confronts you. Most initiators do not follow the model we just talked about. Therefore, as a responder, you must take responsibility for successful conflict resolution by following the conflict resolution model yourself. Responding to a conflict resolution takes a similar approach. First, listen to and paraphrase the problem using the XYZ model. Then, agree with some aspect of the complaint. Ask for and give alternative solutions, and finally, make an agreement for change. Frequently, conflicting employees cannot resolve their dispute. Be a mediator, not a judge. Make employees realize that it's their problem, not yours, and you're responsible for solving it. Get the employees to resolve conflict whenever possible. Remain impartial unless one party is violating company policies, and don't belittle the parties in conflict. The mediating conflict resolution steps are as follows. First, have each party state his or her complaint using the XYZ model. Second, agree on the problems. Third, develop alternative solutions. Fourth, make an agreement for change and follow up. Remember that what you think affects how you feel, and how you feel affects your behavior, human relations, happiness, and performance. Think about the specific behavior that's causing the conflict and how to resolve the issue. Leadership is the process of influencing employees to work towards the achievement of objectives. The essence of leadership in organizations is influencing and facilitating individual and collective efforts to accomplish objectives. A manager's leadership behavior affects employees' behavior, human relations, and their happiness, as well as job performance. Clearly, leadership affects company success. Therefore, organizations recruit for and spend millions of dollars to develop employee leadership skills. The trend today is away from old school autocratic leadership to participative and shared leadership. It's called shared leadership because the leader shares influence and joint decision making through participation by employees in management activities. Shared leadership is simultaneous, ongoing, mutual influence process by both official and unofficial leaders. All leadership is shared, it's simply a matter of the degree of participation in each situation. People tend to use the terms manager and leader interchangeably. However, that usage just simply isn't correct. Management and leadership are related but different concepts. Leadership is one of the 5 management functions: planning, organizing, staffing, leading, and controlling. And leadership is critical to management success. Some can be a manager without being a true leader. There are managers, you may know of some, who are not leaders because they don't have the ability to influence others. There are also good leaders who are not good managers. The informal leader, an employee group member who takes charge, voices issues, and initiates change, is a case in point. You may have worked in a situation where one of your peers had more influence than the department manager. Our definition of leadership does not suggest that influencing employees is the task of the manager alone. Employees influence other employees. Anyone can be a leader within any group or department, and everyone is a team is expected to be a leader. Thus, regardless of your position, you're expected to share leadership. In the early 1900s, an organized approach to studying leadership began. The early studies were based on the assumptions that leaders are born, not made. Researchers wanted to identify a set of characteristics or traits that distinguish leaders from followers or effective from ineffective leaders. Leadership trait theory assumes that there is a distinctive physical and psychological characteristic accounting for leadership effectiveness. In fact, personality traits do affect leadership style. Researchers analyze traits or qualities such as appearance, aggressiveness, self reliance, persuasiveness, and dominance in an effort to identify a set of traits for all successful leaders. A list of traits was to be used as a prerequisite for the promotion of candidates to leadership positions. Only candidates possessing all the identified traits were given leadership positions. In the 70 years that have passed, however, more than 300 trait studies have been conducted. There have been no universal list of traits that have been identified as successful leadership qualities. In all cases, there were exceptions. Even though it's generally agreed that there's no universal set of leadership traits or qualities, people continue to study and write about the importance of leadership traits. Why? Because leadership style is shaped according to a leader's traits and behavior. The Big Five personality does not have a preferred leadership profile. With the Big Five, high surgency and conscientiousness are positively related to successful leadership, and high agreeableness and low adjustment were negatively related to leadership success. In a survey, 782 top executives were asked, what is the most important leadership trait for success as a supervisor? Answers to the survey revealed integrity, industriousness, and the ability to get along with people, human relation skills, were the top three most important traits for success. Whatever your traits are, remember that traits are important to leadership, but there's no universal list of traits, and you don't need every trait to be a successful leader. By the late 1940s, most of the leadership research had switched from trait theory to focus on a leader's behavior. In the continuing quest to find the one best leadership style in all situations, thousands of studies have been conducted in an attempt to identify the differences in behavior of effective leaders versus ineffective leaders. Behavioral leadership theories assume that there are distinctive styles that effective leaders use consistently, that is, that good leadership is rooted in behavior. In 1945, Ohio State University began a study to determine effective leadership styles. In their attempt to measure leadership styles, the researchers developed an instrument known as the Leader Behavior Description Questionnaire, known as the LBDQ. Respondents to the questionnaire perceived their leader's behavior towards them on two distinct dimensions: initiating structure, the extent to which the leader takes charge to plan, organize, direct, and control as the employee performs the task, and consideration, the extent to which the leader communicates to develop trust, friendship, support, and respect. At approximately the same time of the Ohio State studies, the University of Michigan Survey Research Center began leadership studies. Researchers at Michigan identified the same two dimensions or styles of leadership behavior. However, they called the two styles by different names. Job centered, this is the same as initiating structure, and employee centered, which is the same as consideration. Different combinations of the two dimensions of leadership result in four leadership styles. According to the leadership grid, different combinations of two dimensions of leadership result in five leadership styles. The leadership grid provides a means for evaluating leadership styles and then training managers to move towards an ideal style of behavior. The leadership grid is based on two leadership dimensions called concern for production and concern for people. The model identifies five major styles. The leadership grid portrays five major leadership styles: authority compliance, country club management, impoverished management, middle of the road management, and team management. The impoverished manager, 1 1 leader, has low concern for both production and people. The leader does the minimum required. The sweatshop manager, 9 1, is of high concern for production and low concern for people. The leader uses position power to coerce employees to do work. Country Club 1-9 leadership represents a low concern for task accomplishment coupled with a high concern for interpersonal relationships. They try to create a positive climate by being agreeable, eager to help, and conforming and uncontroversial. The middle of the road 5-5 leadership style describes leaders who compromise, who have an intermediate concern for the task and the people who do the task. They find a balance between taking people into account and still emphasizing work requirements. The team manager 9-9 style places a strong emphasis on both tasks and interpersonal relationships. It promotes a high degree of participation and teamwork in the organization and satisfies a basic need in employees to be involved and committed to their work. The leadership grid is a model that identifies the ideal leadership style as having a high concern for both production and people. Although scholars gave up on trying to find one best leadership style, today researchers continue to further develop behavioral theories of leadership. Transformational leadership, a contemporary view of leadership, is a behavioral theory because it focuses on the behavior of successful leaders. Transformational leadership is about change, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Transformational leaders also can be charismatic leaders. Although charisma is not needed to lead, it can help. Charismatic leaders have the ability to engage employees by energizing them to meet challenging objectives and inspiring them to greatness. Transformational leadership has been contrasted with transactional leadership. The transaction is based on the behavioral strategy of you do this work for me and I'll give this reward to you. Stewardship theory states that leaders should be servants of employees and the organization. Stewards focus least on satisfying their own personal needs to fulfill followers' needs as they live the values such as honesty, altruism, and courage and treat employees well. Authentic leadership is about being yourself. Use self-leadership or influencing yourself because if we try to copy someone else, we're not being our true self and we're usually unsuccessful. Positive manager-subordinate relationships are invaluable to organizations as employees want to have inclusive leaders who feel that they can relate to this person that oversees them. Your most important job as a leader is to develop relationships with others. Both the trait and behavioral leadership theories were attempts to find the one best leadership style in all situations. In the late 1960s, it became apparent that there's no one best leadership style for all situations. Contingency leadership theories assume that the appropriate leadership style varies from situation to situation. Contingency, also called situational leadership, is based on two-dimensional behaviors. The major difference is selecting the appropriate leadership style based on the person and the situational factors. Changes in the dynamic environment may require changes in leadership styles, and the frequency of checking on employees varies based on the situation. In 1951, Fred E. Fiedler began to develop the first situational leadership theory. He called the theory contingency theory of leaders' effectiveness. Fielder believed that one's leadership style was a reflection of one's personality, trait theory oriented, and is basically constant. Leaders do not change styles. Contingency leadership theory is used to determine whether a person's leadership style is task or relationship oriented and if the situation matches the leader's style. If there's no match, Fielder recommends that the leader change the situation rather than the leadership style. The first major factor to determine whether one's leadership style is task or relationship oriented. To do so, the leader fills out the least preferred coworker (LPC) scales. This is followed by determining the favorableness of the leader's situation. Situational favorableness refers to the degree to which the situation enables the leader to exert influence over followers. The more favorable the situation, the more power the leader has. There are three variables in order of importance: leader member relations. Is the relationship good or poor? The better the relations, the more favorable the situation. Task structure. Is the task structured or unstructured? The more structured the jobs are, the more favorable the situation. And position power. Is position power strong or weak? The more power, the more favorable the situation. To determine whether task or relationship leadership is appropriate, the user answers the three questions pertaining to situational favorableness. The leadership continuum identifies 7 leadership styles based on the use of boss centered versus employee centered leadership. Before selecting one of the 7 leadership styles, the user must consider the following 3 factors or variables. The manager. What is the leader's preferred style based on experience and confidence in the subordinates? The subordinates. What is the subordinate's preferred style for the leader? And the situation. What are the environmental considerations, such as the organization's size, structure, goals, and technology? As you consider the situational variables, you'll realize that they're descriptive. The model does not state which style to use in which situation. The leadership style tells the leader which style to use in a given situation. Normative leadership theory is a decision tree model that enables the user to select the most appropriate of 5 leadership styles. In 2000, Victor Vroom published a revised version of this normative leadership model with the title Leadership in the Decision Making Process. Vroom identified 5 leadership styles based on the level of participation in decisions by the followers. Here's Vroom's latest version of the 5 leadership styles. Decide. The leader makes the decision alone. Consult individually. The leader talks to employees individually to get information and suggestion, then the leader makes a decision. Consult the group. The leader talks to a group of employees to get information and suggestion, then makes the decision. Facilitate. Have a group meeting for employee participation with the leader making the decision. And delegate. The group makes the decision. Although the normative leadership model is primarily a leadership model, it's also used to determine the level of participation in decision making. There are actually 2 different models and a series of 7 questions to answer, making it quite complex. Situational leadership is a model for selecting from four leadership styles the one that matches the employee's maturity level in a given situation. For the most part, situational leadership takes the two-dimensional leadership styles and develops four leadership styles. Telling is high task and low relationship. Selling is high task and high relationship. Participating, high relationship and low task. Delegating, low relationship and low task. The model tells the leader which style to use in a given situation. To determine the leadership style, one determines the follower's maturity level. If it's low, the leader uses a telling style. If it's moderate to low, the leader uses a selling style. If it's moderate to high, the leader uses a participating style. And if it's high, the leader uses a delegating style. No one best supervisory style exists for all situations. Instead, the effective supervisor adapts his or her style to meet the capabilities of the individual or the group. Based on the Ohio State two-dimensional leadership styles, supervisor-employee interactions fall into two distinct categories: directive and supportive. When we use the term supervisor, we're referring to you, and employees can be others if you're not in an official supervisory role. Directive behavior. You focus on directing and controlling behavior to ensure that the task gets done. Tell employees what the task is and when, where, and how to do it, and oversee performance. Supportive behavior. You focus on encouraging and motivating behavior, explains things, and listens to employees' views, helping employees to make their own decisions. In other words, when a supervisor interacts with employees, the focus can be on directing, getting the task done, supporting, developing relationships, or both. These definitions lead us to the question, what style should I use and why? The answer is, it depends on the situation, and the situation is determined by the capability of the employees. There are two distinct aspects of capability. Do the employees have the experience, education, skills, and so on to do the task without direction? Motivation. Do the employees want to do the task? Will they perform the task without encouragement and support? Employee capability can be located on a continuum from low to outstanding, which you will determine by selecting the one capability level that best describes the employee's ability and motivation for the specific task. These levels are as follows. Low, or C1. The employees can't do the task without detailed directions and close supervisions. Employees in this category may have the ability to do the task, but they may lack the motivation to perform without close supervision. Moderate C2. The employees have moderate ability and need specific direction and support to get the job done properly. The employees may be highly motivated, but still need direction, support, and encouragement. High C3. The employees are high in ability but may lack the confidence to do the job. What they need most is support and encouragement to motivate them to get the task done. Outstanding C4. The employees are capable of doing the task without direction or support. It's important to realize that capability may vary depending on a specific task. Each supervisory style involves varying degrees of supportive and directive behavior. In some situations, you need to be in control of the people being autocratic, whereas in other situations, you need to empower others using a laissez-faire leadership style. The four supervisory styles, autocratic, consultative, participative, and laissez-faire, relate to different levels of employee capability. The autocratic style involves high directive, low supportive behavior and is appropriate when interacting with low capability employees. You give very detailed instructions describing exactly what the task is and when, where, and how to perform it. The consultative style involves high directive, high supportive behavior and is appropriate when interacting with moderate capability employees. You give specific instructions and oversee performance. The participative style is characterized by low directive and high supportive behavior and is appropriate when interacting with employees with high capability. You give general directions and spend limited time overseeing performance, letting employees do their tasks the way they need to do it and focusing on the end result. The laissez faire style entails low directive, low supportive behavior and is inappropriate when interacting with outstanding employees. You merely inform employees about what needs to be done. The better you match your supervisory style to employees' capabilities, the greater the chances of being successful. Don't forget that you have to be the supervisor to use the model when you influence others as a leader. Although leadership is important globally, most leadership theories were developed in the United States, so they have an American bias. Theories make a number of assumptions: employee responsibility rather than employee rights, self gratification rather than employee commitment to duty and altruistic motivation, democratic values rather than autocratic values, and rationality rather than spirituality, religion, or superstition. Thus, the theories may not be as effective in cultures based on different assumptions. We need to abandon the one size fits all assumption. However, charisma needs to be idealized across cultures. Within Europe, there are diverse management models which raise a range of management education issues. European managers deal with more cultural than technical issues in the context of a diverse value system and religious background. Management is organized more as a language than as a set of techniques. Thus, leaders in different cultures need to automatically lead differently. American, European, and Japanese executives realize that they must manage and lead their businesses units in other countries differently than they do at home. Although cultural differences will continue to affect leadership, the instant communication, individualism, and material acquisition of global products in our society today threaten traditional family, religious, and social structures, and the trend towards the development of a more global blended culture continues. We don't look for a one size fits all solution or leadership style. Effective leadership is based on trust. As leaders, we must be trusted by others to influence them. Managers who are not trusted by employees don't have their respect. Employees who trust their supervisors have better job performance, whereas abusive supervisors aren't trusted and negatively affect performance. Unfortunately, the public's trust in business leaders in most countries is low because of unethical behavior. As you probably already realize, being trustworthy is important in your personal and your professional life. Trust is the positive expectation that another will not take advantage of you. Most new human relations begin with deterrence based trust because we lack experience dealing with the other person. It's the most fragile since one violation or inconsistency can break the trust. So we try to be on our best behavior when we first meet people. Knowledge based trust is most common in organizational settings. Trust is based on experience dealing with the other person. The better you know people, the better you can predict their behavior and trust them. Identification based trust occurs when there's an emotional connection, friend rather than just coworker. It's the highest level of trust. People look out for each other's best interest and act for the other. Integrity is at the center of any model of trust, holding the other four dimensions together because without integrity, trust breaks apart. People who have integrity are honest and sincere, and people want to work in a culture of integrity. People need to believe that you have the skills and abilities to carry out your commitments. Consistent people use the same behavior in similar situations. They're predictable. People who are loyal look out for others' interests. They don't take advantage of others. Betrayal triggers intense emotional reactions, as you might have experienced. People who are open accept new ideas and change. They give the full truth. Trust is earned and builds over time. Years of trust can be hurt or destroyed with one bad act of distrust. For example, if you get caught in a lie, miss a deadline, or do a poor job, you're disloyal, you might hurt the relationship. Your relationship may never be the same again, or it could end. Be sure to always be trustworthy to avoid having to repair trust. After trust is broken, we obviously need to follow all of the tips to building trust. However, to truly repair trust, the starting point is to admit mistakes and give a sincere apology. People apologize more often to strangers than to their romantic partners or family members. When we do something that breaks trust, the other person is likely to be emotional, so we need to stay calm and calm the other person, and apologizing usually helps. Even if you don't believe you did anything wrong, you can apologize for breaking trust with the other person.